beach later, Jesus, or
today?
too hot? Yeah.
We've got to do a bit of shopping today, so after the group there. It gets a bit mad this time of the year in Al Jazeera, doesn't it? So, I think it's the most populated shopping, congested shopping thing I've ever seen. I reckon. And I've been to quite a few places in the world. The locals must hate the tourist time of the year, but love it at the same time. Is that how it is?
You have to stay the timings, you've got to go at lunchtime before the beach empties.
Yeah, that's right, exactly right. We went at 6 o'clock the night we arrived. It was like wall to wall people.
And the shelves are empty.
And the shelves are
empty.
that's right, yeah. Shelves are empty, yeah. It's funny in Europe, we find some things quite funny. One thing that's quite funny is car parks are always 3/4 of the size of the car. Every place we've gone to stay, the towels have been 3/4 the size of what you need. They're about to wipe yourself. Yeah, it's quite interesting. You go to the US and it's completely opposite of that. The car parks are like double the size of a car. And the towels are like king size beds. Yeah. It's just interesting the different psychology of different countries and how it all plays out. Yeah. And travelling to different locations like we do, obviously, I think the only place we haven't been to collectively is Africa,
yeah,
isn't it? And, but pretty much everywhere else we've been, it's
we're a bit
rainy.
bit rainy together.
Drop that down.
Yeah. But Portugal likes to give the illusion of being more laid back, doesn't it? Than the rest of Europe. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's see how that goes. A bit lower for us, but can you guys still hear up the back? Yep. Oh, good.
It's nice sounding here, isn't it?
Yeah. What's your name? Yeah. Well, Mary and I didn't get much sleep last night for some reason.
I know, we just didn't rest.
Yeah.
A bit,
And given the fact that it's probably going to be quite warm this afternoon, we might finish off about 12:30 today, I think. Does that sound all right with you guys, or were you disappointed about that? Some of you are disappointed. But tomorrow, we might do tomorrow instead. Yeah.
Just that I haven't found the place where to stay, so if you stop, I can't be there tomorrow.
Okay. You guys got to travel. Who's got to travel tomorrow? Okay. Today. Okay. No worries.
I know a good place, maybe for you, where I'm staying.
Yeah. Yeah, what we want to do today is try to cover at least some of the material we wanted to cover yesterday and never got to. And also remember the question was asked about God and God's nature and God's character, which we'd like to answer today. But before we begin, we'd like to probably just address some problems that we observed yesterday with regard to the amount of spirit influence many of you are under. I guess that many of you come from New Age spiritualist background, is that correct? Put up your hand if you sort of have been interested in sort of New Age spiritualism. Yeah, so a few. Yeah. And what other spiritual pursuits have you had other than that? Any at all? Or, if we use a microphone now so people can hear what we say.
Advaita Vedanta.
Yeah, okay. Same.
Yep.
Same. Yeah, okay.
Oh yeah, if you want to pass back.
The goodness of human kindness.
Yeah. So all of these things are what I would classify as variations in degrees of natural love teachings, like so how to become the perfect human teachings. And most of them are motivated by groups of spirits who unfortunately don't have as high ideals as you believe they do in most cases. The spirits themselves who are involved in many of these things are actually generally quite, they remain quite connected to the earth, and they also remain in many cases quite earthbound. And what they're attempting to do in many cases is get many of you to engage with them in a way that is going to allow for their addictions to be met by your actions. I just need to have a cough. And one of the problems we foresaw before we started yesterday was that many of you don't realise that actually your condition is often better than the spirits who are around you that you are honouring. And this is a problem that we see generally with most of these spiritualist teachings. A lot of times the spirits involved in the teachings want to use intellectual teachings that appeal to you in terms of love and truth and other things like that appeal to you. They want to use those teachings in order to gain a foothold into your life and then to manipulate your life in some way so that they can meet their own addictions. So and these spirits are adept at doing that, and there are very large numbers of these spirits, billions of these spirits currently on Earth, currently trying to manipulate people on Earth who feel they have higher ideals, but the spirits themselves are using the fact that you can't tell who you're connecting to as a method of manipulating you into doing addictive things, or even into teaching you things where you believe they're loving and they're actually not. An example of that is to do with sexual activity. You know, a lot of people believe in free love and free sexual activity between multiple partners, and this is not something that is a part of what God constructed. It's something that humans believe in, but also it's something that spirits would like to encourage you to do in order for them to meet their own sexual addictions. And so what we see is that a lot of spirits on Earth are influencing people who start out with high ideals, want to be more loving and more allowing of other people's free will and more engaging of their own free will and so forth, but they get manipulated through these teachings. And one of those teachings, of course, is tantric teachings, but also other teachings involving what these spirits believe love is, and it's not God's standard of love. The problem with that is that when we come to a group, we find that we have more opposition sometimes from the spirits who are with us, and which I'm getting now.
Than from the people who are present.
Yeah, than from the people who are present.
So yesterday what was happening was a number of you were just sort of curious or a bit non-committal, I would say. The people who were here for the first time, just like, okay, I'll just have a listen.
Yeah.
But the spirits with you were very resistive to you continuing to listen and engaging with it, with your heart, with your feelings.
Yeah.
And so as the day went on, it began to feel quite heavy. And
It was
some
quite
of you
heavy
felt
from the
quite
beginning,
tired.
to be frank.
Yeah, but it got increasingly heavy. And that was a lot about the spirits projecting at you, don't listen, or, a lot of you kind of have a standard in yourselves where you won't project a lot of rage or a lot of nastiness, but the spirits with you don't have the same standards. So sometimes they're just impressing on you to be disengaged, but projecting at Jesus and I, this is bad, stop that now. But in other audiences, some people don't have the same moral standard within themselves, and they start to get angry at us as well. So, yesterday that was what was happening throughout the day.
Yeah. They also often interfere with your thought processes as well in that process. So they often interfere with your thoughts. So while you're listening, all of a sudden you're distracted, and like can't get back on track and things like that.
Or feel a bit impatient,
Or feel
like,
impatient. Yeah.
get on with it.
Yeah. So, unless we as a group deal with that today, there's not a lot of truth we're going to be able to share with you today. So, we've tried, Mary and I have been thinking about, well,
How do we deal with that?
How do we deal with that? One thing we could do is have a talk to those spirits. They're not very happy about talking to us because they feel we're going to upset their life, and they feel that if we share truth with you, you may start to use your conscience more and start to want to desire to do things more lovingly in your life, and that will then interfere with their plans for you and for your life. And so they are concerned in that regard as well. They are aware that we know who they are, and they are aware that we know how many there are and so forth. But they are also aware that most of you don't know how many there are and who they are and what their influences are and why they're influencing you. And they'd like to keep it that way. So
I wonder, would anyone like to ask any questions about what we've just outlined? Because some of you might be a bit of a strange concept.
Can we start with Olga and then we'll work our way back here, and then on this side.
So Elsie, you're on this side, remember?
Yeah,
so if you just keep your hand up, Marie. Yeah.
So
Elsie,
Marie,
you can just
and then work our way back there.
I was just wondering what we can do when we get spirit attack. Probably just feel about it, right? But I'm just wondering how we can support you.
Yeah, not just that. Remember yesterday we talked about the band of allowance that generally occurs, where you're allowed to stay in a certain condition of love, but if you grow to further, and I said, remember that the earth condition is in sphere 1, and then above that is 2, 3, 4, and so forth. The earth condition of love is in sphere 1 of the spirit world, and for the most part it's quite hellish actually, the earth's condition. And the spirits that surround Earth generally are in much the same condition, unfortunately. Now, the reality is they also know that there are people on Earth who are motivated towards wanting to be more loving and more considerate of the environment, more loving towards others and more loving towards themselves. They realise that those people don't have a connection with the conscience very much, but they realise the personal motivation of the individual is that they would like to grow more in love. But the spirits know that if you grow more in love, remember what I said, remember I gave the illustration yesterday with me and Mary. If Mary grows more in love and I want her to stay in this condition of love, and then she starts telling me, I'm being unloving, I'm going to start getting angry and upset, and I'm going to start resisting her progress in love. And unfortunately, for many of you, that's what the spirits around you are actually doing. They're resisting your progress in love. They want you to stay in a certain condition because they get their addictions met while you're in that condition. But if you change your condition, then they won't get their addictions met anymore. So just like I gave the illustration yesterday of me wanting Mary to stay in a certain condition of love so my addictions are met. So an example of that I gave yesterday, remember, was I wanted to pick up all my clothes after me, and I want to wash all my clothes, and I want to cook for me, and I wanted to clean for me. And I think that's love. So these spirits think that's love. So I'm not saying they always know they're being evil. They think that's love. But when Mary wants to grow out of that condition and get to a new condition where she realises, no, actually I'm unloving, demanding those things of her, and so she stops doing those things for me, I, the person in the condition who believes that is what love is going to say, put pressure. Remember I gave 3 or 4 different examples of the kind of pressure I would put on Mary. It ranges from just gentle sort of bribery type pressure right the way through to outright violence is what these spirits are capable of doing, of course. So those spirits who are around you often they want you to stay in the condition of love you're currently in. So the problem is, well, how do you address that? How do you deal with the fact that not only do you have partners and friends and family and everyone wanting you to stay in the same condition, but on top of that, you've got a group of unseen people who can get into your head. You know, they can make suggestions to you. The law, God's laws allow each of us to make suggestions to others, and they also allow spirits to make suggestions to you. So they can sort of get in your head and make suggestions. A lot of times you think these suggestions are your intuition or your inclination or your desires, but actually they're the desires of the spirits around you. So how do you, and this links back to the question that Tim asked, remember, last night, how do you determine the difference of a person who's inclinated to help you versus a person who's inclinated to get what they want from you, right? So if you look at the world today, the most of the world is governed in such a way that it's to get other people get what they want from you, and you get what you want from others. And that's really how the world works at the moment. It doesn't work well, of course, but the barter system, which is you give me what I want, I'll give you what you want, is alive and well on earth, and it's not love. It's completely the opposite to love, in fact. And when we're talking about addiction, it can turn out to be quite evil. Like, I give you what you want, let's say approval, you do what I want. Go and hurt somebody. You know, get angry with somebody, punish your child, or in the case we even see little children, you know, overcloaked by spirits almost constantly nowadays, and you see them controlling their whole family, like bossing their family around, screaming and yelling at their family. And most families don't understand that these little children, that's not their inclination. It's the spirits who want this freedom where they can boss people around, because they had a childhood that was quite different while they were on earth. They want to overcloak a little child and get them to boss the whole family around. They get a whole lot of power tripping out of that, you know, so they enjoy that. And so you see these things happening all the time on earth, and yet the average person on earth is quite unaware, for the most part, because either they don't believe in spirits at all, or they don't believe that spirits' inclinations are going to be the same as people on earth's inclinations. For some reason, most people in spiritual pursuits, most people believe that once you die, you all of a sudden are more loving than you were on earth, right? And that's not true. In fact, quite often people become even more unloving after they pass than they were before they passed.
Because nobody can see them.
Because nobody can see what they do, and nobody's going to monitor what they do anymore. There's no law, like governmental law, controlling them anymore. So an example of that is that many men who would like to be voyeuristic with women's bodies, for example, when they pass, they spend half of their next 50 years just going around and watching women in their bathrooms, right? And they might not have got away with that on earth. They would probably be put in jail for that on earth if they were ever caught. But in the spirit world, that's what they do. And they might do that for years and years and years. There's spirits I know that are doing it 2,000 years later. So a lot of people have this tendency to believe that for some reason when you die, there's this magical transformation, and all of a sudden you become free of all of your human sin, all of the sin being disharmony with love. You become free of it, and you don't. You carry it with you unless you change, unless you choose to change yourself, you carry it with you. So what we see happening on earth, there's around 20 billion spirits at the moment on earth. In fact, there's 3 times the amount of spirits on earth than there are people at the moment. Many of them are just living on earth, like they live in houses, in your houses, some of them, and they do things. They act as if you're, in some cases they'll act as if you're an interloper in their house when it's your house, but in other cases they take over. They're more connected with the emotional addictions that you may have and influencing those addictions in a manner that benefits themselves. An example of that, and you see this a lot in all around the world, an example of that is all the people who have ever been reliant on alcohol while they're on earth generally become earthbound and overcloak other people who drink alcohol. And every time a person reaches for a glass of alcohol, these spirits come and influence them to drink more, to the point where they're so inebriated they can't even remember where they are or what they're doing. And in Australia, this is a very big thing, like where you often have people their entire weekends can't remember their entire weekend because they were drunk the entire weekend, doing things still, but they can't remember even what they did because the spirits were doing them through them. Right? So this happens all around the earth, and like I said, there's 3 times the number of dark spirits on earth than there are people. So it's very important that you come to, I'm not saying this to frighten you, I'm just saying come to be aware of what's going on around you, you see. Now, how do I measure the inclination of a person I can't see? Now, that's a good question, isn't it? Like obviously, when there's a person you can see, you go, oh, that person went and did that, they went and did that, and then they talked behind my back there, and then they weren't honest with me there, and they were untruthful there, and they were yelling at that person over there, so they weren't very loving there. You can observe their behaviour and you can go, well, maybe I shouldn't keep company with that person because they seem to be quite unloving, right? How do you do that with spirit? Particularly when you start thinking that some of the messages you're getting are your own. How do you do that? How do you, or how do you do it when you start believing that some of the messages you're getting are your own intuition? How do you do it then? It becomes very tricky, you can see, right? And it's going to require you having or developing some skills to tell the difference. Yeah, and we can talk about that in a minute, about skills, but the main thing to bear in mind is that there is this very dark negative spirit influence all around the earth, and things are not all light and love around the earth. You might want to believe they are, but they're not. And the reality also is there are spirits who are trying to change that, spirits with good inclination trying to change that, but rarely do they get through the 20 billion other spirits who are trying to make the world darker, a darker place. Yeah. All right. So, Olga, your question, how do I recognise? I think we need to spend a little bit of time on, don't we? Yeah. So we will do that in a minute. Yeah. Any other questions that if we come across here? Yeah.
Yes, it's been really big actually for me because I'm getting there.
That's okay.
I arrived thinking that I was on the fast and doing the work and doing everything, and yesterday I realized how overclocked I was. Coming here, I almost got into 2 car accidents, which never happens to me. I had like this chain I always have on me, it's a Mary Magdalene chain. It broke the same morning. Yeah. Just like so many things happened just before I arrived, and I had all like this feeling of like, you shouldn't go there, you shouldn't go there.
Yeah, so that's these spirits, isn't it? Yeah. Telling you, don't go there, we don't want you there.
And then when I came back home, I felt so drained on my way back that I had to stop on the road to have like a little nap because I couldn't even like, go back home. Yeah. And I was so mad at you. I was like, I don't want to go there tomorrow again.
Yeah, why would I want to torture myself again? But see, who's torturing you? It's not me, right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So then it gets me like to think a bit. Because sometimes when I try to go through like emotions that really scare me, I really feel it, and then it's really big, and then I yawn, and then I can't feel anything. Yeah. It's like immediate. Like I will yawn, and then I try to connect again and I can't. And then I'm thinking maybe these are also, like spirits not wanting me to go there. I'm not sure. Or maybe
Well, can I explain what's happening for you?
Yes.
Yeah. What's happening is there are certain emotions you do not want to feel. And for most women, that emotion is fear. And one of the reasons why you enter codependent addictions with spirits is because they give you the illusion of making your life like smoother, no fear, and they don't want you to feel your fear because they're using your fear to manipulate you actually. And the way they do that is they go, we'll give you information, we'll help you out as long as you live the kind of life that we want you to live. But as soon as you don't live the kind of life we want you to live, we will start punishing you for making a different choice or preventing you from making that choice. So the experience you've had, which is an experience a lot of people who come to our seminars have the day or two before the seminars, by the way. We have people come and they're so attacked by spirits while they're with us that they have to leave straight away. They think they have to leave straight away. Of course, that's not the way to deal with it, but that's what they do. So they leave straight away and then they're all relieved again. They're not attacked anymore. And so that's how spirits can manipulate us, by using our fear and feelings that we do not wish to feel. They use those and they trigger those feelings when they're in a situation they don't want us to be in. And most people are inclined towards comfort. And so what they do is they go, well, I'm not comfortable here, so I'm going. And this is a very easy way that many spirits use to manipulate people on earth. What is required in terms of an internal state to overcome it is the good question, isn't it? What am I going to need to do to overcome this? Well, firstly, I'm going to have the courage to feel some feelings. In particular, for yourself, your fear. And that's something you haven't wanted to feel. And because you don't want to feel it, it's something that can be manipulated by others. Yeah? But if I have the courage to feel my fear, now they can't manipulate me through my fear. So that automatically disconnects their ability to manipulate me with fear. Now, there are other feelings too that are generally most people find uncomfortable. One of them is shame, which is a fear of a kind we talked about yesterday. It's a fear that you're bad, a fear that you're somehow internally evil, a fear that you're not worthy. And these fears, so shame, they can manipulate your shame. They can make you feel that way, right? They can cause events to occur that make you feel unsettled, and then make you feel like you're ashamed of yourself. And then they can manipulate you by controlling that emotion in you. Because you don't want to feel it, you try to avoid it. So if they see a situation that they want you to avoid, they'll make you feel shame in that situation so you can avoid it. So they get you to avoid it. So a lot of people don't realise that it's the emotions they do not wish to feel are the ones that the unseen people around you can manipulate the most. And so that's one way, Olga asked about what are the ways, that's one way we can deal with this problem. Mary wanted to say?
Yeah. No. I don't like interrupting when you're in a flow. But the key thing, though, is to feel what's actually being triggered. So if we think about Marie's example, there was almost a feeling of dread, something bad's going to happen. You almost had the accident, something precious to you.
The breaking of your...
it was like an omen. A lot of people would say, oh, something bad is going to happen. So that's spirits actually triggering your fear. And then when you get here...
He's not just triggering it, he's trying to create it.
Yes, it's saying, be afraid, be afraid. And then when you got here, if you think about it, now we start to see the things that you do to avoid your fear. So you feel tired. I want to get out of my body. I want to go away. Oh, lethargic. Then you start to feel angry at others. Stop, and not at the person who's really triggering the
you.
fear, but at someone else, you know.
Yep.
So the key thing is to recognize fear when it's being triggered, because, so for example, some people when they're getting attacked, they start attacking themselves and think, oh, I just have to feel like I'm a bad person, this is the feeling I'm having. Often that's the avoidance, like you feeling sleepy or feeling angry at someone else. Those things are the avoidance of the actual thing that's happening. So it's important to be sensitive to what's actually happening. Also speaking to Olga there about, you know, what's a dynamic with the spirit, because often we take on what the spirits want us to believe rather than what they're threatening, you know, feeling what's being triggered in us that we're avoiding. Yeah.
Now, to my mind, there's much simpler ways to deal with the problem than all of that, and all of what we both just mentioned. And
We don't have
somewhere.
on top.
Can't see if you're looking. The way that I have dealt with it myself is this. There are things that are, you could say, are classified as the highest ideals you could have. So what are they? What are the highest ideals you could have? The ideal to love, isn't it? Is a high ideal, isn't it? I'll just write that so you can read it. Love. The ideal for truth, searching for truth, is a high ideal, isn't it? Yep.
Compassion.
Compassion is an aspect of love, yes?
Humility.
The ideal to be humble is a high ideal. In other words, I want to feel what I feel and not damage other people with what I feel. I want to feel what I feel, own what I feel, be responsible for what I feel, rather than making you feel bad because I don't want to feel something. So it's a high ideal to be humble. Yep. Faith was mentioned, yes. So that's a high ideal to actually place your faith in these things, in particular these things. So have faith that love is good. Have faith that truth is good. Have faith that being humble is good. Right? These are high ideals. Now, in amongst those primary ideals, you can see each one has, you could say, additional sub aspects to it. So love has compassion, understanding, you know, wanting to have empathy, kindness, giving. Love involves all these things. They are all high ideals. Truth involves transparency, openness, honesty. Right? These are all high ideals. Humble involves feeling my own emotions, not projecting or damaging other people with my emotions, not taking action on my unloving emotions. So in other words, not acting upon my rage, for example. If I'm angry, I feel it, but I don't damage other people with it. I don't become violent with it. This is all a part of being humble. A part of being humble is also listening to different ideas and concepts and being able to analyse them in a calm manner. That's a part of being humble, isn't it? And faith is like having a concept that we can actually do better than we actually are doing now. That's a high ideal, that we want to be better people than we are now, right? So these ideals, you could say, are primary things that should be guiding all of our lives on earth. Every person should have these ideals, but of course not every person does. Now, if I am whoever is trying to influence me away from these ideals, can you see they're not probably motivated, are they? So whoever tries to get me to be untruthful, that could be a friend, it could be a partner, it could be a religious leader, it could be anybody. Whoever is trying to influence me to be untruthful, their influence is evil. And I use the word evil on purpose. They are evil because they are influencing me away from the high ideals. Right? Whoever influences me away from love is influencing me away from a high ideal. So an example of that is politicians who try to influence you to be angry with another country and go to war with them. Another example of that is a group of politicians who cause you to try to be angry with another group of politicians. Another example of that is a group of medical profession who try to make you scared rather than actually informing you. Right? These are all examples of people not loving you, and therefore they are not well motivated. They are motivated through other ideals that are not good ideals. They're not loving ideals. These are the loving ideals. So the best way to measure the kind of people you're with, whether they're unseen or seen, is whether they're influencing you away from high ideals. Now, if you come to a seminar like this and I was claiming to be Jesus, and I was trying to set up a cult, and I was trying to get mind control over you, which is what a lot of people sort of accuse me of doing, and I'm trying to set up this, worldwide conspiracy, which is really influencing the way in which you use your will, right? So let's add one more to this list, because this is the gift God gave you of will, free will. So if I'm trying to influence you away from the way you're using your will, unless my influence is in harmony with these ideals, I'm out of line. And if I bring to bear any pressure, and I bring to bear any manipulation, and I bring to bear any fear, which are all against these ideals, you can see my motivations must not be pure. Makes sense, doesn't it? So I find personally the best way to tell whether the spirits are poorly motivated or the people around me are poorly motivated is, are they doing things in harmony with these ideals? And, Mary and I receive thousands of emails a year, obviously, tens of thousands of emails a year, and you should read some of them. They're not very motivated towards high ideals. They're talking about murdering me and raping Mary and all sorts of things, right? Not influenced by high ideals. So would you even read them? As soon as I read a line, I delete. I don't read the rest. They are not motivated by high ideals. I don't need to listen to them. All I need to do is listen to the people who are motivated with high ideals. Yeah? So there's a lot of people who are self-aggrandizing. Is that the word? Yeah. Aggrandizing. Mm-hmm. They want to be special in the world. Not a high ideal. Doesn't match these ideals. Doesn't match humility. Don't need to listen to them. Doesn't matter what they think they know or how good what they think they know is or anything like that. If it doesn't match the ideals, no point listening. Not going to help you. It's going to just harm you.
Can I come back to a word you said? You said you have to, you need courage to feel.
Yeah.
And I feel actually courageous when I sit down and I'm like, I'm going to go there. I know it's scary, but I'm going to go there.
Yeah.
And then I start to feel and it builds up and then I've got this huge headache and then I yawn and then it's gone. But
so that's your intellect deciding that you want to be courageous.
Yes.
But in your heart, you are feeling not very courageous.
But then how do, I go from the heart and up to the mind?
Good question. And that's going to take time. You're going to have to find why the lack of courage exists, why it is you want to switch yourself off. And a lot of people want to switch themselves off, so they start to exercise in a high ideal to be humble, is what you're describing. Exercise a high ideal to be humble, which is a good ideal, nothing wrong with that. And it's not even a bad thing that you're doing it with your mind, is it really? Because at least your mind is trying to push you in the right direction now instead of influence you in the wrong direction. So that's a good thing. The problem is your heart doesn't agree.
But I can feel that. I know deep down that I don't want to know. But
Yes, and the key is working through the reason why you don't want to know. So, and this has to do with what we have faith in. See, most of us don't realise, we have talked about this a lot in the past, but a lot of us don't realise that actually many of the things we have faith in are corrupt. So an example of that is many of you ladies have faith that your fear is good. So when you're bringing up your child and you see your child running out near the road and you have all this fear reaction and you grab the child and say, don't do that, and you're acting, in that fear, you think that's good. In fact, many women say that's my right as a mother, like I should have that as protecting my child. But fear is never good. So I'm not saying you wouldn't protect your child from the road. What I'm saying is your fear response in the situation is the thing that's not good. Because when you're in a state of fear, you withdraw love, and now the child's going to connect him having some freedom to move about as a withdrawal of your love, and now he's going to feel restricted, and there's going to be all sorts of consequences of that in his later life. But in the moment, the mother is going, but I have the right to be afraid. She nearly, went in front of a car. Of course I should be afraid. No, you don't need to be afraid. You just need to correct why your child decided to, walk in front of a car. You don't have to be afraid about it. In fact, being afraid about it is more highly likely your child's not going to listen to you, and more highly likely the child's going to walk in front of the car, actually. So the justification of the fear is the problem. So that is indicating in that moment I'm lacking humility to just feel my own feelings, and instead I'm projecting my feelings on my child, and then we're trying to manipulate my child's behaviour through my fear, which is actually not a very nice thing to do. Actually, it's very damaging to your child. But also, justifying it to yourself is even worse. Like saying, well, I have the right to do that because I'm a mum and I should be afraid. That's even making the situation worse. So for many women, fear is the big scary monster that you don't want to go to. And for many men, the big scary monster is sadness. And in fact, what we see is a lot of relationships are the man has a lot of sadness, the woman has to make it go away. She has a lot of fear, the man has to make it go away.
That's marriage.
There's a marriage. There's a marriage. Not a very good one, right? But you can see in that case, the compromising of different principles, the fundamental principles are being compromised, and as a result of the compromise, there's going to be manipulation one way or the other. Now, that also plays out spiritually. Whenever you enter an addiction with a spirit where you want them to make your life safer, the spirit who will enter that addiction with you is going to want something in return. And what they want in return is some level of control over your life. That's what they want in return. And if they want you to go and do other things that you're prepared to do in order to have your fear allayed, you will go and do them. And oftentimes without even thinking. You'll just go and do them because it's a part of the agreement. So really what you're doing is you're setting up, in that state, you're setting up agreements that you shouldn't have to feel certain things. So you need the spirits with you to help you not feel those things. And then they now want an agreement with you. Well, we don't want to have to feel that we're in the spirit world. We don't want to have to feel that we don't have control over our lives here in the spirit world. We want to get back on earth, and we want to do some things on earth that we missed out on doing. So now the agreement is a codependence. Each person getting what they want from the agreement, from the togetherness, each person getting what they want, but one of those persons unseen, so therefore more highly potentially manipulative than you, because you're seen by them, but you can't see them for the most part. So it does get back to, for me, this is what it gets back to. if my goal in life is to grow in these ideals, then it makes sense, doesn't it, that anybody who is influencing me against these ideals is a bad influence. And it doesn't matter whether they're my wife, my friend, my mother, my father, my child, my neighbour, my boss at work, or just people generally, or socially, or trolls on the internet, or whoever they are. If they're influencing me against these ideals, I don't have to listen. I don't have to, and I shouldn't. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. You go over here, and then over there. So, also over. So, yeah.
The question is, how do you bear witness to the tremendous suffering that's happening in the world right now, genocide, and maintain grounded in these ideals?
Well, one of the first things humility demands of you is that you really can't change other people. The only person you can really change is you, isn't it? You're the person who has control over you. You have free will. You can decide what to do, how to become a better person yourself. Now, so what I suggest to people who worry so much about what's going on in the world is that let's first focus on you, on myself. Let's focus on me. Let's focus first on how loving I am, what my definition of love is, how my definition of love may be creating some evil in the world even. Because many of you don't realise that actually your current definition of love is creating evil in the world. And we can go through some of those things, when we talk about God's standards versus human standards. So some of your current definitions of love certainly do create evil in the whole world, not just for your own life. But if I can work through that, if I have a goal, personal goal, to address my state of the use of my will in this loving manner, then I will improve. Once I've improved, I now have the internal capacity to inspire others to make the same improvement. Right? It is only by people's souls actually changing to have these ideals that any improvement in the world will occur. Only by that. Right? I would even go further and say human love is fickle. One day a person's in love and then the next day they hate each other. Right? So that's how fickle human love is, but God's love isn't fickle. So if you receive God's love on top of these ideals, you will get to the stage where you're not fickle in the way in which you express your love. Your love will be evenly expressed to every person. Your partner will experience the same level of love, aside from with your partner being sexual, and that will be the only sexual relationship. The rest of your love will be to the same level as you have with your partner for every person you meet. Right? If you're not fickle. But if you're fickle, you will decide, my children are more important than my neighbour's children. My country is more important than my neighbouring country. You'll decide that my life is more important to get what I want out of my life than it is for a person in Africa to get what he wants out of life. And as soon as you create these inequalities, violence and war and genocides, and they're all possible after that, right? So we must see where it starts. It all starts with the individual making change. Now, the problem for us in Western society is that we have been the worst perpetrators, historically, of abuse of the world than any other places in the world. Mostly because of the power that's wielded by people in the West. Now, you have economic power that other countries don't have. And this applies to Europe. You're in the EU, right? The EU is a huge economic powerhouse, right? It finishes up raping the resources of other countries in order to maintain that power. We are a part of that. But if I become more loving, I will learn ways to lovingly protest, not protest in the sense of march, but my heart will no longer agree with what is happening. And then as my heart doesn't agree, then of course, if your heart doesn't agree and my heart doesn't agree and then a million others' hearts don't agree, now we have power to change other situations, systems like governmental systems, medical systems, environmental systems, economic systems. All the systems of the world can change, but they can only change if we understand what love is. And if we think our version of love, which I said, remember at the beginning yesterday, said our version of love is in the first sphere, unless our version of love changes, how can we influence others to change? So my feeling is focus on your love changing. Focus on your development of these qualities. And as you do, you will then have the power through talking to people to influence them to make similar decisions. And when they are also influenced to make similar decisions and become more loving, then there's a group of people who are more loving. And then eventually a country of people who are more loving. And then eventually a whole environment of people on all earth more loving. That is the way it's going to happen. But God is not going to change anything for us. And the reason why God won't is because he lets humans fix their own problems. We created this problem. We need to fix it. Make sense?
Yes. And you still want to say something?
I was just going to add, your actual question is about bearing witness.
It's about bearing witness.
Yes, and I feel bearing witness is important. A lot of Westerners do not bear witness to the suffering that happens on the planet.
Say what you mean by bearing witness, though.
Yeah, so seeking truth about what's happening in the world and being able to state it, feel about it, be aware emotionally of what's happening in the experience for others. I think the only way that we can effectively do that is through implementing these principles. Because a lot of us, when we first start bearing witness, if you like, looking at what's happening, it stirs up a lot of feelings in us. And unless we're humble, we're not going to be loving about the situation. We're going to respond in anger or indignation. It's going to remind us of something that happened in our family or my childhood. And we're going to want to stop things in a very unloving way. We're going to act violently in our emotions or our actions just to try to manipulate the external events rather than bearing witness, if you want to use that term, and feeling about what that's bringing up and allowing that to help us to grow towards love, to being truthful, to having the capacity to experience our own pain and suffering and then act in response to other people's pain and suffering in a way that's not affected by our stored pain and suffering. Because most of the people in the world who are trying to alleviate other people's pain and suffering are doing so because they're trying to alleviate their own pain and suffering. And actually it's not very effective if we look around the world.
It's also very selfish.
It is, and it's missing that first step of humility. And so I think being able to bear witness or to be able to see what's happening and not be insular in my own little life, to see what is happening is an act of love and to have compassion for it. But it's not something that happens automatically for people because they've got stored pain. But if they seek the truth and they're willing to feel their pain, then we can be present with other people's pain. Yeah, and actually find effective solutions to it. Yeah.
When Mary and I first met, Mary was overseas aid. She was in overseas aid. She was doing volunteer work overseas. She'd spent 2 years. 2 years in
more than 2 years,
in
probably
refugee camp.
In a Palestinian refugee camp.
Helping Palestinians in a refugee camp. She had a goal to go to Africa and do the same thing. And one of the very first disagreements we had was about that. Do you want to?
Well, yeah.
We were in a shopping centre.
Yeah, I wanted to boycott. I wanted to boycott an Israeli.
I was walking past.
I had been affecting.
Nice nuts. Mary's saying they're from Israel. I'm saying, so what?
And I'm saying, well, isn't boycotting an effective way to peacefully resist something that where I feel there's an injustice happening in the world? And this started this conversation, which really led to me giving you this answer, really, about the fact that I was feeling a lot of, I was carrying a lot of pain in myself that resonated with the people that I'd been living with for 2 years.
I'm Palestinian, by the way.
Oh, yeah. So I was feeling very connected to this pain and suffering in your history, yeah. And I was feeling very...
And anybody who's sensitive surely would be.
Yeah. It's a pretty tough history. Yeah, and then we had this discussion about, well, do I want to love both Israelis and Palestinians? Do I just want to cease the suffering of the people that I was connected to? And was I really considering how my actions might affect everyone, and more than that, how my feelings were affecting things, But
you also wanted change without understanding the dynamics, without understanding the spirit dynamics, without understanding the spirit influences in both countries, without understanding the religious influences in both countries,
so I just sort of wanted
the errors in those religions in both countries.
Boycott is an act of hatred, no?
Well, yeah, that's what I've come to believe, that boycotting is actually an act of rejection and division and hatred. But at the time, I was full of, I want to change the world in a peaceful manner. What do I have at my fingertips, And that's what I had decided, and my position has changed. Yeah, yeah. But it's the real solutions are more complex. They require more of us than just boycotting or protesting or, getting angry or writing an angry splurb. But, all of those things are ineffective because there's no heart change and there's no personal commitment to dealing with our own pain and suffering first.
Not only that, it doesn't address the actual causes.
Which is the causes, yeah.
Yeah, if you look at the actual causes of many of these smaller country problems, they are because of the big countries harming those smaller countries.
Colonization.
Yeah. And that is not being addressed ever. And to have a proper addressing of any problem, you must address its cause, not just its effects. And what we were talking about, Mary and I, a lot was that, do you want to keep dealing with the effects of problems? Because there's going to be problem after problem after problem after problem that keep on getting caused. And if nobody addresses the causes, because nobody seems to want to a lot of the time, because everybody thinks it's too hard or it's too difficult or, it's too big or whatever, nobody wants to really address the cause. So what we do is we get involved a lot of times for selfish reasons in just solving the effect, because it makes our guilt or our feeling of everyone's suffering go away a bit. It makes us, instead of becoming really conscious of, wow, there's a lot of pain in this world and a lot of it's getting caused by these big problems that nobody seems to want to address.
So how do you address those? How do you decolonize everything?
Yeah.
You have to bring love, truth and humility into every problem first. That's the very first thing that needs to happen. Every problem has a solution, but it's going to require also, if you think about it, some bravery, isn't it? Like, Mary and I go around the world, we criticise almost every government, we criticise almost every religion. We criticise because there's no love in them. On earth there's hardly any love in anything, is the reality. And we criticise governments, we criticise religion, we criticise personal people's situations, their families. We don't do it because we're critical, we do it because we're saying, here's the ideal of love, and here's where you're not measuring up. And that's the reason why we've got all this unhappiness, right? That's the reason why we do it. But everybody feels it as criticism, of course. And so then most people, when truth and error confront each other, truth is just happy to present itself. Error is not happy just to present itself. Error wants to fight for itself. it wants to get violent for itself.
Justify.
It wants to justify itself. Right? We even see that in you yesterday. Many of you were in that place already yesterday, fighting for, coming up with intellectual arguments or reasonings, trying to fight for the error. And we watched an interaction between Pierre and Maxine last night. Both of them fighting for their error. It's like, and this has to change if we're going to actually change anything else, right? So what we need to do is we need to understand the standards of these things. Once I understand them and I feel them, now I can share them. I'm in a place where I can share them.
And I'll reflect them, actually. That even more
in my
important
day-to-day
than
life, I'll
sharing
reflect them.
I'll reflect them in my interactions.
And also, because love is the opposite of fear, I won't be afraid, no matter who attacks me for it, no matter who belittles me for the sharing. You won't be afraid doing it. You will go, it's right. What I'm doing is right, so I'm going to do it. It's like, but as soon as you enter into sort of like a emotional, violent attack of somebody, or a deep resistance inside of yourself about going to a place of humility, or any of those places, you don't realise, but we're actually participating in the reason why the world is like it is in those places. Right? So it's very important that these things firstly are understood by the individual, which is the reason why Mary and I spend most of our time teaching about these things. And then groups of people, if they make these changes, can now bring the same change into systems. So the political system of the world, the political system of the world is absolutely stupid. Like, to be frank, like even democracy is stupid, because it's like you look at democracy, everybody votes, but do the people with 90% of the vote get in? No. Who gets in? Oh, the people with 34% of the vote. And I go, how does that work? Well, is that democracy where 34% of the people are happy and the other 66% of the people are unhappy? But because there was 3 or 4 parties and they were all voting on a party level, one got 34% of the vote, one got 30% of the vote, one got 28% of the vote, and so forth. The one with the most percentage of the vote gets in. That doesn't make any sense at all. Wouldn't it be better to have a democracy based upon a region sets up like 15 different areas of interest, so technology, arts, music,
road,
science, structure, infrastructure, and so forth. There's all these different regions, and they have a choice of voting in the expert from their region on that subject, and there might be 5 different experts on that subject, and they all have to vote in who they want, and the person with the most votes on that subject gets to represent them elsewhere, right, in government or whatever. Now we're talking about each region being represented more fully, also on subjects where the people who are voted in actually know about them. Because I've met most politicians I've met, they don't know anything about even the area of expertise they're meant to be in. So how can they make wise decisions? Like I know they've got a team of advisors, but why aren't one of those advisors in their position? Like, it doesn't make any sense to vote someone in who knows nothing about it when there's an example of that is there's a medical professional who can make decisions about medicine, and we're voting in a politician who knows nothing about medicine and giving him the portfolio of medicine when the medical professional is right. They're advising him that he should be the one who's in that responsibility, making that decision. And then why is it that in these governmental systems in democracy that they all get together and they all vote on a subject, but it's not the experts voting on the subject? There's all these political, some party says this and some party says that, and some party has this doctrine that says this. They're basically religions being portrayed as politics, really. And all they're doing is saying, we're going to adhere to our party policy and we're going to vote in line with our party policy. But who cares about party policy? Don't you just want the best thing to occur? Of course we do. So democracy is said on earth to be the best form of government. Absolute crap. At the moment, the way democracy is, it's not democracy. It's like 30% of the people have a vote. In some countries where voting is not mandatory, only 20% of the people vote because they're sick and tired of voting, and the whole thing just continues. Nobody wants to change it because nobody wants to bring more love into it. There are solutions to all of these problems. There's solutions in the medical system, like I said, all of the industries of Earth, the economic system, the environment. There's solutions to all of these problems, but they're going to require out of us, firstly, these qualities, and then it's easy to get together and come up with a solution that actually works. Yeah, but of course it would have to get rid of corruption, right? Which a lot of politics and religion is involved in on Earth. Greed, which a lot of politics and religion and science is involved in on Earth. So there's science now. Most science now is not science. What it is a company with a lot of money choosing to direct the science in a certain direction that's only in harmony with the company's policies and the company's ideals. So it's not really science. It's just manipulation of science.
Like the vaccines.
You need to speak. You need to not interrupt. And it's a manipulation of science rather than real science. Right? So if this is happening in every walk of life, we can change it, but we can only change it by ourselves first, knowing how to change it. Right? It's no good criticising a system if you don't have a solution. Right? Most people on Earth, they criticise system after system after system after system, but they don't have any better solutions because they haven't brought themselves in a higher condition of love yet to understand what the better solution is. So this is why these qualities are practical.
Yeah, very.
Practical. And a lot of people don't think they are, but they are. They're practical for life, because once you bring yourself in harmony with these qualities, you can see solutions become very self-evident once you are in a higher state of these ideals. All the solutions to problems become self-evident.
Thank you.
If we were over here, sorry. But,
hey. Back to spirits.
Yep.
I have some very dark spirits with me.
Yep.
They are male.
Yep.
Very, very aggressive.
Yep.
Extremely violent.
Yep.
I know who they are.
Yep.
I know who they are.
Yep.
And so we don't have this manipulation. It's more like attack. I feel a lot of attack constantly.
Yeah, but you're not understanding the reason why they're with you. So why are they with you?
Do you know why you might want...
Why do you want them with you?
Why? I know it's a hard question because you feel attacked by them.
Yeah.
But do you know why there might be something in you that wants aggressive men around you?
Because I received a lot of violence from men.
When you were little? Yeah. And so having someone big and strong and violent around you can help you to avoid how scared and small you might feel otherwise in the world.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
But also your refusal to feel that emotion causes them to feel like they have some power over your life.
Yeah.
And so they feel attracted to being with you as a result of that. Does that make sense? Your refusal to feel the violence of your childhood in a grieving manner is the cause of the problem.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
And for men, it's difficult because you're taught that grieving is, weak. Even I don't know why this is a bad thing, but it's girlish. But I think the girls are pretty nice. So anyway, but that's how we're treated, right? So we're treated like it's a weakness, it's a problem if we go to our grief. And most men are very frightened of their grief as a result. And because of that, they often get... there's usually two groups of spirits that overcloak men. One group of spirit are like the group of spirit who are with you. who are trying to be sort of violently abusive towards you and dominate your life that way, and they get power over you this way, and they're basically getting power only because you're refusing to feel your grief.
Yeah, and can we say, let's talk about it a little bit more, because when they overcloak you, then you're going to tend to act out their feelings. But
Don't do it anymore.
No, but
No,
in the
you
past
used to
you
that,
did,
right?
didn't you?
So that actually,
Yeah.
I used to
use
do
the
it
mic,
a
so
lot.
I can't hear you properly.
Yeah, sorry. If you just use the mic, that's what I was referring to in the first instance. So they used to come along and act through you,
Yep.
and you were open to that because you were quite scared and you wanted to avoid that and you wanted to kind of be tough, and so that allowed them through. Now you've got more morality. I'm not going to do
You've
that.
grown in some of those
In
qualities.
some of those qualities, but now you're contending with their attack of you.
Yep.
And then this is where Jesus is saying, if you can be courageous and feel that fear and grief from when you're small, they won't affect.
It'll
They'll move
disconnect
on.
them,
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't trust that, of course, and so they never do that. But my personal experience has been, all you need to do is have a good cry about the actual issues. Go through your terror and your grief about your childhood with your father in particular, right?
Not only.
Not only.
More than.
Yeah. Well, if it's with your father first, it usually ends up being with schoolmate, all sorts of things, right?
Yeah.
So that's a simple answer to that question.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we go next, and then we're over here somewhere, weren't we? We're here. Who was next to you? Nobody's got the mic yet. Just straight behind. Yeah, and we'll pass the mic back. Fire away.
Yes. So would you say that the cornerstone of what you're saying is learn how to feel your emotions and then feel them in simple terms, really? Maybe for me to go back to basics about what you're saying.
That's a part of what we're saying.
Well, it's not the cornerstone of what I'm saying. And the cornerstone of what I'm saying is have a relationship with God, and that the God stuff. See, a lot of people start believing that divine truth is like a self-help program. It's not a self-help program. It's a relationship with God program. Now, a relationship with God will solve many of your problems, because as you develop the relationship with God, you will work through many things, including developing those qualities. Those qualities will almost be natural to develop as you develop your relationship with God. This is why we encourage people to receive love from God and progress that way. But the problem for most people is they don't even know what love really is or feels like, and they don't even really know how to experience their own feelings, even how to actually have a feeling for God, how to have a longing for God, how to have a desire. Most people have become so detuned through their childhood, but by the time they're in their teens and their 20s, all they're doing is acting on addiction rather than desire. So everything becomes, you give me this, I give you that, everything's fine, and we're all happy. And obviously we're not all happy, but we're doing the best we can is the general thought. But what Mary and I are trying to teach, firstly, is that a relationship with God does solve all of these problems, but in order to have a relationship with God, you've got to be able to connect emotionally. Now, what you just said about your emotions is very true. You do need to soften to what your emotions are and start recognizing them, but more importantly, you need to experience them. Because when you experience them, if they are a negative emotion, they will be relieved. In other words, they'll leave you. So if you think of your soul, so here's your half of the soul, full of emotion of different types, but mostly all denied, mostly all suppressed. So when you start feeling an emotion that's out of harmony with love, your soul is constructed in a way that emotion will leave you, and it won't ever return unless you invite it. Right? Remember, as a child, you didn't invite it, but it was sort of forced upon you. But now as an adult, once you have an emotion leave you, it can only return if you invite it in. Right? So let's say the emotion is, as we were talking just earlier, fear, terror, and grief about how your father treated you. Let's say it's that. Right? Once you fully feel that emotion. And by the way, that emotion will be experienced at the age that it occurred. So you're going to feel quite nuts feeling it, because you're going to go from being, how old are you now? 50 to being 4 when you're feeling it, or 3 when you're feeling it, right? So you're going to feel, it's going to be like quite a psychologically challenging thing to do to release it. But once it's gone, it's gone. And it won't ever return unless you invite it in, and you'd never choose to invite it in again, would you? So why would it ever return?
You know, I think my sense of the work that I have been doing is that I'm playing around on the surface in some way.
Yeah.
So I feel,
I agree.
and I think that I'm feeling my emotions, but am I really getting to the causal root of them?
No.
So that is, you know, in response to just what you put on the board then, it's like getting to the root, how to really feel, how to get to the root of that.
Yeah, that takes time
emotion.
to develop that skill, actually.
Yeah, it's not something you just decide
It's
to
not
do
something you
and
can
whammo, you do it. You know,
Yeah.
you have. There's a lot of reasons why you shut down in your childhood experience, and
Yeah.
this gets back to some of the things we were talking to Maria about you have beliefs about what's going to happen if you feel your
Yeah.
emotions freely. You have corrupt faith. You think, oh, everyone will think I'm nuts. What if it never ends?
What
How
if I am
gonna cope
4
with
and I
it?
feel like I'm 4 for the rest of my life?
Yeah,
That's going to be bad.
you know, and it just feels like it was so bad, and I won't even survive it. You know, a lot of these beliefs we have are actually emotions as well that we need to release. Or we feel like being the way I am now, stoic and like kind of man of the world, that's protected me. That's what I took on to protect this little person or these experiences inside of me. And so it's a process of deconstructing all of those things that is going to enable you to feel more and more, and eventually you'll release.
Well, that's half of it, isn't it?
Yeah, because you've got to. Yeah, you go. Other half. Tag.
Well, the half of it is what Mary's saying, that you've got to get rid of the pain. You've got to get rid of the pain from your history, and the only way you can.
You mean feel it?
Yeah, you're gonna. That's the only way you can get rid of it, is to experience it fully at the age it happened.
Would you think, if you think about yourself as a God-created being, and I know some of you are not there yet, that there is a God who created you, but if you think about a loving parent, they would want you to feel capable to experience yourself and to know your life, and to know that you're created with the strength to release pain and experience immense joy. That's how God created us, and to engage your will to face challenges and pain, but also to seek love and truth and faith, and to experience the benefits of those things. A loving parent wants you to do that. So when a lot of people come to say, well, I've got all this suppressed pain, why on earth should I have to do it? Well, a loving parent would want you to be able to do that. Yeah.
And be able and get you to the stage where you can cope with anything.
Yeah.
So can I ask?
So that's step 1 to 1. Remember, we haven't gone to 2.
You've got to go tag to 2.
Ask whatever you want.
So, like, is it good to understand what my limitations are in feeling these feelings, these emotions truly, and what pointers would you give to really feel? Like, in your experiences, how did you guys feel ultimately those deep grief, that sadness? How did you guys do it?
Well, I'm still in the process of doing it.
The biggest quality you're going to need to develop is compassion for self. Most of the time we were taught in our childhood to not have compassion for self, to not have compassion for your own feelings, to not even recognise them where possible. You're going to have to learn and develop compassion for self. You're going to have to get to the stage where you go, I know I've got stuff within me, and I'm not going to be able to access it even unless I have some of this love of self, compassion for self, compassion for my circumstance and situation. I'm also going to, so you could rename that love of self, couldn't you? Because that's what compassion is, an aspect of love. So you're going to have some love of self. You're going to also have to have some love of truth. Because a lot of, in your childhood, there's a lot of lies that have been presented to you about why your parents did things. you know, and why the society did things. And those things caused damage to you, but you were also lied about it. So many of you now believe the lie. You will even regurgitate the lie. You know, like when I say that, what I mean is that when somebody says to you, "Oh, this happened to you in your childhood and that was really bad," you go, "No, it wasn't. It happens to everybody." There's a lie.
They meant well, or
they meant well. No, they didn't. That's a lie. You know, it's not. You might say, and this might be the more accurate statement, they didn't know what they were doing, which is probably more truthful. You know, hardly any parent comes with a manual to know what they're doing, right? So you know, they probably didn't know what they were doing. But surely, if they were sensitive enough, they knew they were hurting you. So obviously, they were desensitized by the time they had children, which is a problem. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had your problems, right? But if you have compassion and love for self, you will go, I'm not going to stoically and angrily push myself into feeling something, because that is not going to ever work. It's never going to, you're never going to access the emotion if you do that. Also, there's no magical solution. You know, you can't just lay on a bed and get a bit of massage and a bit of tickle here and you know, like, and all of a sudden, all of your causal emotions in your childhood are going to pop out all of a sudden, because you're going to have to develop a level of desire for them to come in order for them to come. You know, because if you think about your soul, in your soul, you've got suppressed emotion. So I'm drawing half, right, because you're a half. You've got suppressed emotion. It's suppressed because you don't want to feel it.
Your will is engaged.
Your will is saying, I don't want to feel it.
It's interesting because I would say that my desire to feel is definitely there.
I disagree.
I say that because I feel the implications of them. You know, I suffer from
I agree with that statement.
Yeah.
That statement is true.
And that motivates me to process, to feel.
I disagree.
Tell me.
Well, the second statement you said is actually true. You do have a motivation to deal with some things. So I'm not criticising your motivation here. What I'm saying is you've got some fears inside of you about how to go about doing it. And those fears create a lack of motivation to do it. Fear is like a wall. So you say these hard emotions are behind the wall. And at the moment, it's like there's a wall there to the real hard emotions. So when you start feeling at the moment, you're feeling some surface layer stuff. You know, it's like sensing the emotion through the wall. But you're not actually deconstructing the wall. So the wall being a wall of fear and terror about the emotion.
And what it's going to be like to be in this space.
And what it's going to mean for your future if you deal with it. And what changes might happen to your life if you deal with it. And what corrupt faith you have about dealing with it. And what damages there might be to your current life by dealing with it. And what changes you might have to make by dealing with it. And there's all these fears that get constructed over the course of our life about the actual feelings. So when you said, I feel like I need to deal with it, I agree with you. I can feel in you, you definitely feel like you need to deal with it. You feel also intellectually like you'd like to deal with it because you can see the problems of not dealing with it, right? You're aware of some of the problems of not dealing with these emotions. So I also agree with that statement. But when you say, I really feel like I want to deal with it, I can't agree, because when you really feel like you want to deal with it, you will have had to have deconstructed this fear. You would have had to have gone through the terror. And that's what most people don't want to do. We talked about this in 2016. We did a group called Understanding Your Loving Self or something like that.
Understanding My Loving Self.
Yep. And in there we talked about this global fear that most people have about the emotions. And until you penetrate that wall of fear, and to penetrate it, you have to feel the terror. So what a lot of people are trying to do is to like somehow scale the wall of terror and go down the other side and then feel their emotion.
So it's like, it's feeling the fear of feeling the strong, deep grief, deep fear again.
Yeah. Exactly that.
And a lot of times, so we construct sort of this entity that interacts with the world. And when you come up to this...
Can we call it fake me?
Fake me, facade me, got it all together me, you know, the one who's in control and all of that.
Control me.
Yeah. When you come up to this wall and you consider what's on the other side, part of what you're grappling with is, I'm going to have to give up this entity that interfaces with the world, how I'd like to perceive myself to be, to discover what's really underneath, you know, what I'm really harbouring. Because it's not just the way I've been harmed, it's the way I'm harming others, and there's a lot of things in there.
There's a lot of sin in it too, like of things that I've actually done to harm others.
That I'm going to feel about.
And people are far more afraid of dealing with that than they're afraid of dealing with anything else, to be honest.
Yeah. So in my experience, a lot of it's been deconstructing even the person that I'd like to think I am. You know, that I had a lot of fear about that, to coming to who I really am. You know, what's really in me. And what's in us is not who we are either. It's just stuff that's been stored that we can release so that we can become who we really are. We can fully express who we are in a loving sense. But, you know, when we're in this facade-based lifestyle, we're a long way from who God created us to be, and also what we're carrying, what we're storing.
Yeah, maybe that's my sense of it, is that I'm playing around on the surface, so to speak.
Yeah, in front of the wall.
Yeah.
In front of the wall,
In a way that doesn't challenge your current life.
Too much.
Yeah. Just keep it to an hour a week or something.
And to be frank, when you get behind the wall, it's going to blow your whole life away.
Yeah. Which is
happens
good.
To everybody.
So what would you say about that? About, you know, getting through that wall?
Yeah, that as Mary said, one of the very first things that need to happen is, and by the way, we still haven't talked about the second, have we? But I just want to remind you that we haven't done that. As Mary said first, you need to start just deconstructing the fake self, because the fake self is a construction made in order to control the fear that you have to keep everything suppressed behind the wall, right? And that fake self is generally a construction of our own, for the most part. You know, we learn, usually by sort of mid-childhood, 7 or 8 years of age, we start to realise a fake self is necessary. And so sometimes you see it earlier, but rare. But after 7 years of age, nowadays we're seeing in children of 3 or 4, because it's so subconsciously done, unconsciously done. But for the most part, most people, by the time they're 7, they start realising a fake self is necessary in order to survive life. And so what they do is they start working on the person they're going to come to be, like the person they're going to try to be. And that self, you end up being very proud of, because that self saved you from all the pain and suffering of the hurt self, or the person that was hurt. But the problem with that is it also covers over all the hurt quite effectively. And it also enters addictions quite effectively, right, with other people to cover over the hurt. And so we end up sinning in that fake self quite a lot. We end up doing things to avoid the pain and suffering that we have experienced in childhood. We end up doing a lot of things that act upon that pain and suffering. And honestly, many of you think, don't have a lot of pain and suffering from a childhood, but from God's perspective, God's standard of love, almost every single person on this planet has a huge amount of problems regarding love. And so this is, from God's perspective, how you've been injured is all about love. How it's been outside of God's standard of love. So from God's perspective, God's standard of love is not being applied on earth, and a lot of the damage you think is normal. Like for many of you, you think, oh, this is normal me. It's not normal you from God's perspective, because it doesn't meet God's standard of love, and also a corrupt standard of love, which we call evil, if you look
love
at
spelt backwards.
Love spelt backwards, which is really evil, right? So the opposite of love, if you think about it, is really evil, right? Many of us believe evil to be love. That's how bad our definition of love is. we don't realise how bad it is, because we haven't had anybody teach us God's standards our entire life, for the most part. Religions are not capable of teaching you God's standards because they don't have them. And they purport to be the people who know all about God, but they don't know anything of God's standards of love. Most religions teach that God is a punishing, cruel God. So they definitely don't know God at all, right? So they're teaching that this standard of love that they say God has, but actually it's not God's standard at all. It's human standards. And they're basically justifying human standards of love by creating a religion to justify those standards. And the net result is even the people who purport to believe in God are actually teaching you that God is evil. So how are those same religions ever going to teach you what love really is? And so the net result of that on earth is that we have imbibed all of these beliefs. And maybe what we need to do is just have a quick break for you to go to the toilet, and then talk about some of those standards we've imbibed. Oh, yeah. So that you can sort of understand. So here I'm talking about the theory of it all, right? But we haven't really talked about what it looks like in practice, have we? Like how these things have become switched over in our own belief systems, where what we believe love to be, from God's perspective, is actually quite evil, right? And it's really powerful to understand this switch that has occurred, and then in the process of understanding the switch, we can start deconstructing the problem. Right? We have to face the problem before we can deconstruct a problem, right? Scientific method. So we need to define the problem, then we can deconstruct the problem. And the problem is fundamentally that our beliefs of that we think are love, for the most part, are not love at all. The opposite of love, which is evil. And this is why we end up with evil en masse, you know. The whole world is in a state, really, isn't it, of evil. We're destroying the environment. We're destroying the very place we live in. We're going to get to a stage in 30 years' time, probably, where the environment's going to be so hot the majority of us are going to have to move somewhere to cool down. And then on top of that, we're destroying the environment so much that the oxygen production in the environment may be so far affected, because at the moment the main oxygen production is the ocean, you know, with all the seaweed and everything in the ocean. And if we pollute the ocean more than what we're doing, we're going to get to the stage where the ocean will stop producing greenery that sucks all the carbon out of the air and gives us oxygen. And then what are we doing to all the forests? They're all oxygen producers. They're all getting destroyed more and more and more. If we're not careful, we're going to either starve to death, have no clean water to drink, which is going to mean the majority of people fighting wars over water, or we're going to end up with no oxygen if it's extreme. And that's how much evil there is. We're so evil that we're willing to destroy our own home in order to get what we want. Seemingly get what we want. That's how bad it is, right? And yet the majority of us don't see it in practice because we don't yet feel or understand God's standards of love. And this is why most things that are happening on earth at the moment, do you ever see any problem really solved? You know, like, to a large part, the unloving exercise of technology has got us into a situation where we're destroying the planet. And they are telling me that technology is going to be our solution. Now, I'm not convinced, because no one's loving in the way they implement it. Right? Until somebody proves to me they can be loving implementing technology, then I would say unlikely that technology is going to be the solution. Right? The reality is human souls changing is going to be the solution. But it's a hard solution, because each of us are going to be required to break through that barrier of fear and get into the real stuff, to stop being fake and stop, and get into the real me. And the real me, which remember is number one, the first half we're still talking about, is getting rid of the pain, the hurt self. Like deconstructing the hurt self by feeling the hurt and taking responsibility for feeling the hurt. We don't have to take responsibility for the hurt unless we personally created it. But we do need to feel the hurt by taking responsibility for it, is feeling it, because it's in us now and nobody else can feel it for us. And we need to go through that process. That's number one.
Can I be just about the fear?
Yeah.
Yep. And I think it's going to segue into what you were going to say as number two.
Mm.
But for me, deconstructing that facade, that fakeness, that's no joke. Like, that's a big thing you've got to do, actually.
Huge.
It's a big thing to see yourself really, and see where you're out of harmony with love, and where you're actually seeking to meet an addiction, and where you're actually seeking to present a fakeness to the world. And so that's important work. I think this fear thing, because I know a lot of people get pretty stuck at this fear place, the biggest thing that has helped me begin to move through that space is the aspiration for the other things that Jesus wrote on the board before. A true development of my own desire to grow character in harmony with God, God's morality. So that is the thing that created the incentive. And I didn't have to do magical body work or, really focus on my fear as much as deconstruct the crap that I was telling myself about myself, be real about the fact that I was terrified, and then aspire to be a loving person, to be truthful always, to consider what can I have faith in that is realistic and good.
And to go through the emotion of terror in order to do that.
That's what helped me to start to go through the emotion of terror. That's what broke it for me, I suppose.
Yeah. So number two. I'm going to be harping on these things for some time to come, right?
Do you want to do pee break?
Do I want to do a pee break?
Don't you want to
do you want to do a pee break?
Do you want to finish this question
do I want
before
to
we
finish
do
this question
the
first?
standards?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we should.
Let's finish the question first. Right, number two, important thing. So we've already said, deconstructing the fear, you're going to have to go through the terror to deconstruct the terror. You have to feel it, you have to experience it. Once you deconstruct the terror, you will naturally go into the grief, the grieving person. Now, the grieving person is grieving for two reasons. One, things happen to it. Right? Other people, other society, whatever, parents, whatever, did things to it, and it's got grief stored there because it wasn't allowed to feel it at the time. That's number one. Number two is that I did things to myself or to others that guilt is going to have grief associated with it. The guilt of doing the wrong thing is going to have grief associated with it. So there's two types of grief I'm going to have to experience, and that grief will be exposed once I deconstruct my terror about the whole thing. Right? That's number one. That's what we have to do first. The second thing we need to do is we need to learn what is good. We can't just get rid of what is bad, because if you get rid of what is bad and you don't learn about what is good, then you end up with nothing. Don't you? It's sort of like, get rid of everything bad, what's left? I'm a blank slate. And obviously being a blank slate is not going to help you be happy. Right? So you're going to have to learn some good things. What are all the good things? Didn't we just list them? Okay. So God's love, firstly, the best thing you could ever have. Right? So God's love first. God's love. Next thing, human love. Perfect natural man love, loving others, loving self, all that kind of stuff. Loving soulmate. Yeah? Human love. Truth. Whose truth?
God's truth.
Yeah, God's truth. Now, I've got to bring my truth into harmony with God's truth. Because my truth is just crap otherwise. I don't know whether it's truth or lies or whatever, do I? If it's in harmony with God's truth, now I know truth. Only thing that's real in the universe is God's truth, right? Bring myself in harmony with God's truth, which is really the same as saying bring myself in harmony with God's laws. Because that's how God establishes truth, through law, right? Then, in order to do that, I'm going to have to be humble. In order to be humble, I'm going to have some faith. In order to do all of that, I'm going to have to take some not just do all the feeling for 3 years in my bedroom, right, and not live a life. I'm going to have to do all these things while I'm living a life, taking an action in my life. Yeah. Now, if I focus on those things, I am now developing positive qualities, while at the same time, once I've broken through that terror barrier, releasing the unlovingness that's within me. So now my fears are going down, my desires are going up. Now my evil is going down, my sin is going down, my love is going up. My lies are going down, the lies I tell myself, the lies I tell others, they're going down. My desire for truth and my actions in truth, in harmony with truth, are going up. My corrupt faith is going down. My beliefs in what is false is going down. My beliefs in what are true is going to be going up. Now I'm making change. In harmony with God's laws, I'm making change. And as I make change, the changes that will happen in me, eventually other people will see them. Also, they'll start asking, you look happier. What's going on? Why do you look happier? What did you do? Your relationship's better. Why is that better? What did you do to make your relationship more happy? Because ours is not happy. They'll start asking questions. This gives you a chance then to share that you did those two things. You deconstructed your fear. You went into your grief, both the guilt-based grief based on the things you did wrong and the grief that was associated with what other people did to you. And then you also, at the same time, began to develop these things which brought your condition of love up and also caused you to do things in harmony with that condition that now caused you to become happy. And people will see it, they will. And the more they see it, the more they'll be interested in doing it. The more they're interested in doing it, you can help them do it. The more you can help them do it, and they do it, if they choose to do it, because it has to be for them that they choose to do it. If they do it, then they'll benefit, and then when they benefit, they'll feel the same as you, they'll be happier too, and then other people say, why are you happy? And it's like a snowball then, isn't it? Right? But it's got to start with a few of us following God's way. This is God's way. Right? And in the first century, we didn't call Christianity, right? We called it God's way. The way. It was called the way. Yeah. For this reason, because this is the way. And this is, for those of you who have been Christian in your past, this is what I refer to as the narrow way that leads to life. There's a quote of me saying that in the Bible, and I did actually say it. I didn't say there was a broad way leading to destruction. I said there was a broad way leading to hell, to evil, to pain and suffering. Most people are following the broad way. Very few follow the narrow way, because it is a narrow way. It's like God's way. He made it. You've got to find it and then do it. That's how it works. And you've got to want to do it. You're going to have to want to do it like pretty intensely in order to do it. Given the condition of the world we live in, it's going to have to be an intense desire. But everyone who's ever done it has reaped the benefits of doing it. And the benefits are far more immense than you can imagine. Yeah? So, and we've talked about the benefits to different groups of people, but obviously many of you may not have heard the benefits, but it's something worth studying up on, because that can increase the motivation to go through the terror wall and deconstruct the facade and go through the terror wall and into that grief, and to also start developing these qualities. Now we can go to the toilet.
Thank you.
Yeah.